Coming up on a new edition of Wonder Room. Week 1 is in the books. Who's gotten the early lead on the competition? A tale of two veterans in CJ and Kobe, who gets their season started off on the right foot in a big opening day matchup. Aleph and Earthflax aren't the only newcomers in the league, but they might be the most interesting. Just what kind of sets have they been putting together to start the season? Startling surprises in the standings and a big change already for one of the 16 factions. Week 1 of NWBA Wonder Room coming up next. Wonder Room is brought to you in part by Booze Mobile and by Kurtz's Chicken. And now for your host, King Vasser. Hello everyone and welcome back to Wonder Room. Week 1 has come and gone for Season 7 and we've already seen quite a few surprises thus far. Some teams in spots and standings that we didn't think they'd be in out the gate. Some GMs overperforming, some underperforming. Overall, though, it's been far different from what we expected on paper. A lot to cover in this week's episode, but first things first, we have to cover the most important thing that went down in Week 1, and that is regarding the operations of the Mauville Milotics. Last we discussed, NWBA officials had gotten in contact with Seri to be able to play in Season 7, but since then, no further contact has been able to be established. And as such, an interim general manager is going to have to take over operations, that being Luck, the longtime GM of the Lavender Town Spectral Thieves. So he will be taking over for Mauville for the foreseeable future. But now that we've taken care of the important business, let's get on to the fun stuff. A new season means a new format, which means this time around, we're going to start the episodes with the set highlights of the week. And we had some very interesting sets go down over the course of Week 1. Kitakami and Humalau, two GMs that have pretty different career stories. Kobe, we know how accomplished he's been. The only thing missing from his resume is a championship. Meanwhile, you have CJ, who hasn't really been able to put it all together yet, but he does have some notable wins. Remember last season, he knocked off Nico in his season opener. So for those two to go head-to-head in the very first set of the season could spell a lot of interesting things to come. Meanwhile, Mauville under different management. We mentioned earlier Luck taking over for Seri, at least for the foreseeable future, going up against Ball Heat and the Heart Home Heaters. Very good team from last season. We'll see what they can do against one of the OGs of the NWBA. Slitherwing Sicily and Sunny Shore Sparks. Last season, Zach and Flair were on a collision course for the relegation match before Zach was able to turn his season around at the very last moment and avoid that. Obviously, getting off to a better start this season would be huge for either one of those GMs. And then Aleph and Earthflax, two newcomers to the league, piloting Ambrit Town and Mount Coronet. How different will these newcomers' styles be compared to what we've seen in previous NWBA seasons? First game of the season, Kitakami and Humalau going head-to-head. We start with Rabambi and Hydreigon as the leads. Rabambi gets up the webs as Ursaluna comes in. CJ pressing Stun Spore, perhaps mistakenly, and Ursaluna picks up the big kill with Vasser, but that's fine, and Amorous comes right through with the Grit Grass Knot. So here comes Reuniclus, and this is the name of the game. We have seen this time and time again, and we've seen it more and more as seasons have gone on. It's time for the setup sweeper to just come in and get the dub. Calm Minds and Acid Armors coming through for Reuniclus, and when things start to get a little low, the cover comes out. Some turns later, Metagross is in, can't do enough damage, it goes down to a stored power. CJ tries to go for a Salt Cure, but this thing is a Magic Guard, and then Entei tries to come in and get stored powered out of the building. And eventually, Kitakami is going to have to forfeit this game. Cresselia going for crits, it gets nothing going. And Guard trying to go for crits, it gets nothing going. And that's game 1 for Humalao. So we move to game 2, Rabambi the lead again. Gets off a big energy ball on the Swampert going for rocks and then flip turning out into Ursaluna. And so Rabambi figures, hey, might as well get some more chip before going down to a Facade again. So in comes the Enamorous, and now it's time to play the guessing game. Grass Knot comes out, Swampert guesses wrong, down for the count. Reuniclus comes back out. Enamorous stays in, figures it can get some good chip, predicts the Acid Armor well, but Moonblast is not doing enough to keep Reuniclus down for good. Recover is going to outpace it. Eventually, Calm Minds are going to start coming out. Gets a special attack drop, but it's not going to be enough. So Entei comes in on the Recover, and then reveals that it's Terra Dark. And with Stored Power is the only attacking move from this Reuniclus, there's no way Kobe can get any type of progress, so he's got to switch out into Houndstone, and we get to play the game again. Messiah comes in, gets Will-O-Wisp, but is going to do a lot of damage with that Shadow Ball, and an unfortunate Poltergeist miss from Houndstone, so now Ursaluna is going to have to come in, blocks the Shadow Ball, and someone's going to have to come in and take this Facade. Bagard, up to the task, only does 29%, gets some lefties back, gets off of Protect, scouts the Drain Punch, and then tries to go into Enamorous on that Drain Punch, but Kobe outsmarts him a little bit, hits the Facade button, so now Enamorous goes down. Crest comes back in, another Mon with Energy Ball, gets rid of Ursaluna, in comes Hydra, Dark Pulse not doing too much, Moonblast smoking Hydra off the planet. So now comes Haxorus. The Terra Steel comes out, and we've seen Kobe do this time and time again. Gets off the Dragon Dance. Ironhead, Cresselia goes down. Metagross is going to come in. But it lives the Earthquake, and Earthquake's Haxorus right back to take it off the map. And with a weakened Houndstone, picks off Metagross with the Shadow Sneak. But Entei's going to come in, get off a Crunch. And knowing that Reuniclus can't touch this thing, that's a game 2 for Kitakami. So we move on to game 3. Same leads as game 2, you know the drill. Put up rocks, put up webs. Energy Ball, flip turn out. Ursaluna's in, Facade, Rabambi gets the chip before it goes down. The same story, and Enamorous Eye coming in to revenge KO again. So now Hydra comes in, predicting the Grass Knot. CJ gets it right, Moonblast. Hax comes in, Terra Steel, CJ gets it right again, Focus Blast. Haxorus is off the table. Iron Valiant, it's a fast Mon, but not on webs. Moonblast out for the count, and at this point, it's an Enamorous sweep. So Kitakami, for the 2nd season in a row, gets a big upset on a notable name, moves to 2-1 all time versus Kobe, one of the very few GMs that has a winning record on the established veteran. Thanks to Enamorous's 8 KOs, and for Humalao, despite the good performance, Kobe's first season opening loss in his NWBA career. Marvel and Ardhome, 2 teams looking to start off the season well. Marvel came into this set 2-0 already on the season, and right out the gate, Cyclozar gets a big Draco off entitlements, and then dies to a Dragon Tail. I've never seen a Mon die to a phasing move. I just want to throw that one out there. That's kind of crazy. No matter, Ogerpon picks up the Revenge KO and then gets the hell out of dodge before Lunge comes out. Interesting tech there from Ball Heat. Pelipper's able to knock the Scarf off of Raikou. That will definitely be important later, trying to outspeed the Cyclozar. And here comes the Demon Basca Legion F and a Terra Water Specs Surf in the Rain. Nothing's going to be able to take care of that. Forges comes in, Terra Grasses gets off the Giga Drain, kills Pelipper. So now, Pelipper down, T-Tor comes in, set up the sand, but gets blown up by an EQ. Fortress comes in, it's time to get up rocks. Gets off a Lunge to try to live the 3rd Earthquake. And it does, so it's able to spin the rocks away, but at this point, Mauville is up pretty considerably. It's down to Forges and Raikou, and then the big crit from the EQ comes in, and the Giga Drain not able to take out Landorus. So it's going to get some good chip on this Forges, up 3-2. Ogerpon comes in, 1 Ivy Cudgel, Fortress goes down. A second Ivy cudgel. Raikou goes down, and that's game 1 for the Milotics. Game 2, same leads as game 1, Raikou Landorus, and this time, oh, he calls him out. The Terra Blast Ice Landorus goes down immediately. So big lead right out the gate. Cyclozar brings in Pelipper. T-Tar counters with the sand. Gets knocked off, reveals that it's AV to try to stop whatever Basculete is trying to do. Gets off a big knock on the Slowking. And, well, this thing's gonna have to die about it. Slowking goes down to a knock. Basculete comes in. T-Tar eats the surf even without the AV. Basculete goes down to a knockoff as well. So T-Tar getting off a lot of damage. Knocks off the Pelipper as well. And then U-Turn comes out. But luckily Ogerpon comes in. Ivy Cudgel takes care of T-Tar, but it's a big lead for Hearthome in this game too. Samrock comes in after a Fortress lunge, gets knocked off, that's fine. It's time to put up the spikes. Pelipper's got a U-turn out of there. Ogerpon comes in. Now the Sturdy is broken. Mence comes in. Power Whip misses. Fortress comes in on the Ivy Cudgel, and it does just about nothing. Rocks go up, so now Pelipper's in a world of hurt, but it is able to get off a roost. And then a nice Ceaseless Edge miss means that there's still hope out there. Cyclozar comes in, takes a lot of chip damage, but is able to spin away the hazards. But a crit knockoff. These knockoffs paying so many dividends for Hearthome. Cyclozar goes down. Ogerpon's going to have to Sword Stance to try to win. Takes care of the Salamence at +1. But it's not going to take care of the Fortress, who gets off a big lunge, does a lot of damage. Not going to get the KO, but it's not going to matter. The chip is all that's needed. Raikou still has the Scarf this time around. Terra Blast comes out. Pelipper goes down. And Ogerpon's not going to be able to live the second one, so we head to game 3. Raikou once again the lead. This time it's Slowking. So Raikou Volt Switches out for free. Slowking tries goes for a Scald on the Samurai. Doesn't get the burn. 1 layer up. Again, a second layer up. Pelipper goes for the knock instead, so the Wild Lens comes off, but now Samurai's been able to take out the Pelipper. So already the range setter out. T-Tar comes in. It's not going to be able to live 2 Terra Water Surfs, but it's not going to matter because the rain's already gone. Fortress comes in. Lando comes in on that, gets Giga Drained. A lot of damage. Mence comes in, blocks the EQ. So Lando has to get out of dodge. U-turns into Slowking. Dragon Tail. So Basculete takes more chip. Samurai comes in, takes the flip turn. Lando comes in. So Mence comes in on that. Another U-turn comes out. So now Ogerpon is in at neutral. Ivy Cudgel. Salamence goes down. 5-4 now. Cyclozar comes in. Fortress puts up the rocks. In comes Fortress trying to block a Draco. Instead, the spin comes out. Cyclozar U-turns out. Lando is back in, but cannot take a crit Moonblast. So Fortress picks up another KO and then stays in on the Ice Beam. Logan tried to predict the Terra Grass. Instead, Ball, he calls him out. Gets off huge damage with the Moonblast. So Ivy Cudgel comes in to get the revenge KO, but now Fortress can be able to pick up the KO that Fortress put on the table. Slowking comes in, and it has to get lunged, so even though it gets off a T-Wave between 2 Regeneratormons, it's gonna be hard for Mauville to pull this out. Raikou comes in, Volt Switches into Samurott, lives the Draco Meteor, gets off the big knockoff. Cyclones are down to 3%. And Luck figures might as well cut their losses. Stays in, spins, knocks the Scarf from Raikou, but this thing is already faster than these two, so Cyclozar goes down. Slowking can't take 2 Thunderbolts, and so Hearthome picks up the big victory, moves to 2-1. Marlowe falling to 2-1, but both sitting at 2-1. Pretty good spot. Great effort from Hearthome. Raikou led the way with 5 KOs. Ogerpon, very impressive in the loss with 8. And Mauville, despite the fact they had to overhaul a good 4th of the roster before season even began for real, a good effort, good performance. We'll see what they've got in the following weeks. Sicily and Sunny Shore, you wouldn't think that there'd be a tank bull this early in the season, but you know how the NWBA works, and right out the gate, Specs Glamora doing a lot of damage. Skarmory goes down immediately. Grimmsnarl's gonna have to come in, cause some annoyance with the T-Wave. Some pivoting around, Glamora comes back in, but Ghetsis is wrong with the Earth Power, so you know what time it is, the screens are gonna go up. We move later on. Thundurus comes in on a U-turn, Core paralyzed. Thundurus, nasty plots, it's time to play the game. Glamora's gonna go down to a Thunderbolt. Greninja comes in, the Protean Ice Beam, but the Yache Berry comes out. Good tech from Flare. Greninja's gotta go down. Corviknight comes in. On the Psychic, Flare tries to get the read though and Grass Knots, and then tries to Psychic again. Still can't get rid of the Corv. So now in comes the Gengar, it's Scarf. So Zach able to get out of there with a lot less damage put on his team than it could have been. Corv able to defog away the screens, but Ogerpon's gonna be able to get the KO with the U-turn. So Flare up 4-3. Noivern Terras, but U-turns out anyway. Petra comes in on the Ice Cold Crash from Mamo, takes a lot of damage from the EQ, and then Flare goes for Shadow Ball for some reason, maybe trying to predict Gengar on a switch. Instead, Mamoswine picks up the KO, and the big AV comes out, lives the Draco Meteor. Noivern gets crashed and then sharded, but doesn't go down, so Mamo goes down to a U-turn. Grimmsnarl comes back in to put up a Reflect. Palmot's gonna have to go for a Terra Electric. Double Shock, Mach Punch gets the job done. But a big knock comes through on Ogerpon. It's going to live the Double Shock and Mach Punch behind the Reflect. Gets off the Ivy Cudgel. Gengar comes in with the Sludge Wave though, and because this thing is scarfed, Zach's able to pick up the Game 1 win. On to Game 2. Ogerpon gets off an Ivy Cudgel. Reveals a Spiky Shield. Interesting decision there. So Corviknight taking quite a lot of chip before it even leaves the battlefield, but Glamora's back in. Guesses right, Earth Powers, not enough to KO the Petront though. So Skarmory's gonna be able to come in, block that one. Corv comes in, and now we start the Hazard War, but Corviknight does have defog, so it's not gonna be that easy. Zach opting to get some recovery back. U-turns out on the Grimmsnarl, so Glamora takes a little bit of Spike's damage. Grimmsnarl gets up the screen before having to take the Sludge Wave. Skarmory comes back in, a lot more switching now. Hazards finally go off, but Thunder's Eyes ready to get the party started again. Greninja comes in, and Zach knows that this thing is Yache Berry, but figures this is the only way to get good chip on this, so Greninja goes down again to a T-Bolt. On the turn 24, after some slower paced action, Gengar comes in on a U-turn. Skarmory's gonna have to go down to a Shadow Ball. In comes Noivern. Terranormals hits the Boom Burst. Hits the Hurricane, gets the Confusion, Corv hits itself, but Boom Burst's not able to pick up the KO, so Corv able to U-turn out of there. Gengar comes in, hits the Focus Blast, and Noivern goes down. Corv has to come in, eats a Shadow Ball, so Petra picks up the KO. We're back in the back and forth, fast-paced gameplay. Thundurus goes down to a Shadow Ball. Glamora gets knocked off by Ogerpon, and then gets hit with an Ivy Cudgel. Gengar comes back in, and then Flare goes for the Spiky Shield. Zach reveals Destiny Bond. Flare not going for the KO, perhaps not knowing how it works, so now loses a bit of momentum here. But Petron able to live the EQ, get some good chip on the Mamoswine, especially after that crit. Grimmsnarl comes in to go down to the EQ. Ogerpon comes in, Ivy Cudgels. Palmot goes down in one hit. Spiky Shields for the Sludge Wave. And then Zach switches into Mamoswine. Flare goes back into Ogerpon. Lives the EQ, gets off the Ivy Cudgel. So in comes Gengar. Spiky Shields again. Gengar going for the Shadow Ball. It's not going to be enough to take out Ogerpon, so Flare able to take game 2, so we move on to the third game, and this is where the tank bull shenanigans come in. Turn 1, Glamora crits Grimmsnarl through the screens, so it's going to go down right off the rip. Knocks being exchanged, U-turns being exchanged. Glamora comes back in on turn 3, puts up rocks instead. Skarmory finally revealing that it has Iron Head. Goes for another one on Glamora, but that's fine. Decides to get off some spikes. Corv doesn't go for the default. Glamora comes back in. Now at 33%. Zac switches back into Corviknight. And what are we doing? Hazards are up. Now would be a good time to get rid of them before Glamora has to suffer for it. Instead, Zac gets Glamora right back in, gets off the power gem, but it's not going to KO. Skarmory whirlwinds instead of going for the kill. Just questionable plays all around. Skarmory goes down to the Shadow Ball. Noivern comes in, Terra normals to block it, gets off the Hurricane, gets off a second one on Corviknight. Default finally comes through, so Glamora can come in at some point, at least to be a sack, if nothing else. Boomburst comes out. Corviknight U-turns into Mamoswine on the Petrolant, gets off the big knock. Petrolant just decides to get out of dodge with a parting shot. In comes Ogerpon. Corviknight able to take an Ivy Cudgel, predicts a spiky shield, roosts up, so now a pretty good position for Sunyshore here heading into turn 20. Thunderous comes in on the EQ from Mamoswine, gets the big grass knot off but not able to KO. Ice Cold Crash comes through, but instead of ice sharding, Zac just gets out of dodge. So now Corviknight goes down after a psychic and a T-Bolt. Greninja comes in, gets off the Ice Beam on Ogerpon, and the second one is able to pick up the KO. Now it's 5-3. Glamora comes in, takes the Draco Meteor, that's fine. Palmon's able to come in, Terra Electric, double shock, you know the game. Petrolant goes down, so now things are looking really bad for Sicily. Thunderous not able to pick up the KO. Noivern has to come in. It's 1v4. Gengar comes in but misses the Focus Blast. Noivern hits the Hurricane, gets the confusion. Gengar breaks through, but it misses the blast again, and then a Draco miss. What is going on? Gengar hits itself in confusion. It's pandemonium. The fans are going crazy. Noivern's able to get the KO on Mamoswine with the Boom Burst, and being faster than Greninja, picks up the last KO, and so somehow, some way, through the grace of Arceus or Giratina, maybe possibly even both, Sicily picks up the win, their first win of the season. Ogerpon and Noivern combined for 12 KOs. Sunyshore drops to 0-2. A much different story than last season where they started off 3-0. A wild game, some would say a very sloppy game, but at the end of the day, a win's a win, and it's Slitherwing Sicily moving up in the win column. Real fun games, Mount Coronet and Ambrit Town right out the gate. Terrakion with the Rock Blast. Good team building there from Aleph to get Galvantula out of the paint before it can even set up webs. Earthflax wasting no time, goes for the bulk up on Conk. Rock Slide enough to KO Mandibuzz. In comes Crown. The Psyshock's doing heavy damage, but not enough. The knockoff takes Iron Crown off the map before the burn damage takes care of Conkeldurr. Terrakion back in, Rock Blast again. Poltegeist, you know this thing is demonic, but that weak armor going against it this time around. Torterra has to come in, goes immediately for the Shell Smash, and then has to go for a second one to try to predict something from Como, but instead the CC comes out, Torterra goes down. Arcanine has to come in, Terra's Grass, Flame Charge's not going to do enough. This thing is also Life Orb, gets blown up by a CC. And now that's left is Crawdaunt, who also gets blown up by a CC. So 9-turn game 1. What a statement from Aleph. Game 2, right out the gate, Titan predicting that Torterra wouldn't Terra, smokes it with the Ice Cold Crash. Conkeldurr has to come in, immediately bolts up, Guts is activated, Mandibuzz comes in, and a +1 burn Conkeldurr Drain Punch. Even Mandibuzz can't stand up to that one, so it goes down. In comes Iron Crown, goes for the Tachyon Cutter, but that's not enough to KO, so Iron Crown gets one shot by a knockoff again, and this time Conkeldurr is able to live. So Titan comes through with the Ice Shard though to clean up. So in comes Arcanine again, goes for the Terra Blast. Como once again stands in front of it, but Aleph tried to go for a DD. Earthflax, knowing what the conditions were, gets off 2 E-Speeds, and so both mobs are going to go down after the Life Orb CC from Como. So it's 3-3. Crawdaunt comes in, goes for a Dragon Dance. So Titan goes for a Curse. Crawdaunt goes for the knockoff. It does a lot of damage. The Ice Cold Crash not doing nearly enough on the way in. So Crawdaunt's going to pick up the KO. Terrakion comes in, he gets One shot by the Aqua Jet. Lucario's gonna have to pick this thing off with the E-Speed, but at this point, it's a 1v2. Galvantula gets off big chip on the Thunder and the Para just for good measure. So even though Lucario takes Galvantula off the map, Poltegeist is able to come in, get off a Shadow Ball, and so we move to game 3. Drakion the lead again. Arcanine the lead on the other side. Flame Charge is up. Mandibuzz eats it. Como comes in, takes a lot of damage from the Head Smash, but the second one misses a huge momentum swing for Ambrit Town. Como picks up the KO. Galvantula comes in, goes for the Volt Switch on Titan. Torterra comes in. We have to play the guessing game again. This time Earthfax guesses right Torterra. Terra's in the water. Shell Smash is up. So now Titan's got to leave. Como is able to block the Bullet Seed, but it's not going to block the Headlong. Torterra picks up the KO. Drakion comes in. Revenge kills with the Scarf CC. Torterra goes down. Poltegeist comes in. It goes for the Shell Smash. Mandibuzz lives the Shadow Ball quite well, actually. Gets off the big knockoff. Poltegeist down to 1 HP. Lives the second Shadow Ball. Aleph goes for a Roost, but instead of going for the KO, goes into Titan on the Strength Sap. Earthflax gets all the HP back, but with the Focus Sash knocked off, Titan bulky enough to live the Shadow Ball, get the KO with Icicle Crash. So now it's 5-3. Quadon's gonna have to go for a Dragon Dance. Gets blown away by the Volt Switch from the Specs Iron Crown. Drakion comes in, gets off a lot of chip with that CC. Conkeldurr gets a lot of it back thanks to the Drain Punch. Terrakion goes down, but Iron Crown's gonna be able to come in and finally pick up the KO on Conk with the Side Shot. 3rd time's the charm. Now it's 1v4. Mandibuzz goes down to a Thunder, but at this point it's just a matter of chip. Crown lives the Thunder quite easily. Volt Switch is out into Lucario, gets off the chip with the Bullet Punch. In a little bit of cheekiness, so to speak, this battle could have ended a few turns sooner, but it doesn't matter. A win is a win regardless. And so in one of the fastest paced sets that we've ever seen, less than 50 total turns, Ambrit Town moves to 3-0 in week 1 behind the efforts of Como, Titan, and Terrakion. Good effort, well played by Earthflax and Mount Coronet. Unfortunately, drops their first ever set. Starts off the season on the wrong foot. Now, some of our longer time viewers might be wondering why we decided now to switch the structure of the show, and well, we figured it would probably be more fun and interesting for everybody involved if we went with the highlights first so as to not spoil everything that happened over the week. Sometimes people like to be surprised by the standings or the power rankings or how things shake out. So as a result, this is how the structure of Wonder Room will be going forward. So now let's transition into the standings as well as the power rankings, the stats, the numbers section where all the nitty-gritty and the details get covered. Starting with the Ruby League as per usual. Ambrit Town sits atop the Ruby League at 3-0, the only Ruby League team to go undefeated in the first week of the season. 6-1 in games, plus 20 win differential. Pretty damn good start, to say the least. And that's very important because the rest of the Ruby League is packed together like sardines. Sitting at 2-3, you have Corway and Veilstone both sitting at 2-1. Both went 4-3 in games. Veilstone having the higher win differential, but losing to Corway head-to-head, which is how they have the early tiebreaker advantage. And then in spots 4 through 8, you have every other team in the Ruby League at 1-2. Yes, everybody in the Ruby League won a set. And Ambrit Town is the only one that didn't lose. So you're talking about Mount Coronet, Sunny Shore, Sicily, Circhester, and Black City all having a win and 2 losses against mostly each other. So in the early goings, this Ruby League is completely packed together. There's very little separation to be found. And just because Ambrit Town started off 3-0 does not necessarily mean that they're safe. Still a lot of season left to play, but that's a really interesting sign to see 0 winless teams in the Ruby League off the rip. But over in the Sapphire League, you have a different story. New Moon leads with a pretty similar case to Ambrit Town. undefeated in sets, 6-1 in games, plus 22 win differential. Difference being that New Moon has wins on some teams that finished better than 1-2 in week 1. Again, it's still early in the season, so it's hard to say whether or not those are notable wins, but it is important to note that New Moon is one of the 2 teams in the league that finished week 1 undefeated. Spots 2 through 5 are all populated by 2-1 teams. Heart Home, Mauville, Kitakami, and Mistralton. So some names that people might not have expected to see here. You're talking about CJ, who hasn't had the greatest career up to this point. You're talking about Luck, who had to step in on a Wednesday in the middle of week 1 to take over this team. And Beku, who we haven't seen since season 1, all got off to good starts on the season. Nat Queen City sits at 6 at 1-2. Had a competitive week, 4-4 in games, and a positive win differential at +3, just wasn't able to grab the wins that were present. And then the 2 teams sitting winless after 1 week, Humalau and Littleroo, both 2-6 in games. Hard to say what's going on with Humalau in particular. They start off the season as pretty heavy favorites, at the very least, to make it far, if not to win the entire thing. So to see them start off 0-3, again, is a sign of just how wide open things might be this season. Are the times changing? It's only been 1 week, so let's not write off Kobe and his gang just yet, but very interesting to note right out the gate. As far as the initial power rankings for Season 7 goes, again, important to not take these things too seriously. It's only been 1 week of play, so there isn't too much separation between teams. But as it goes, New Moon and Ambertown top at 1-2. Heart Home at 3, Corway at 4, Kitakami at 5, Mauville at 6, Veilstone at 7, Mount Coronet, despite having a 1-2 record, sitting at 8, and Mistralton, despite sitting at 2-1, sitting at 9. Again, it's important to note that the quality of play does matter for these things. Just because someone's record is better than another does not necessarily mean that they have more momentum, so to speak, after the course of a week or 2. But again, its initial power rankings, realistically, all these teams occupy the same spot. Sirchester, Nat Queen City, Black City, Sunny Shore, and Sicily following in spots 10 through 14, and then Humalau and Littleroot bring up the rear at 15 and 16. Expect a lot of movement from this point on. Things are almost never static after the first week of the season, and it would not be a surprise to see some of those teams in the back third, perhaps even the back quartet, find their way up to the top half or even the top quartet by season's end. We're just going to have to wait and see how the season unfolds. The week 1 stats leaderboard looks pretty interesting at the top. Titan leads the league both in KOs and points with 18 and 37 apiece. We mentioned that with Terra, anything can happen, and especially in a generation where offense and setting up is more prevalent than it's ever been. So Titan is your league leader in KOs and points after 1 week. An Amorous Eye of Kitakami has 16 KOs and 25 points. That's good enough for a second. Screamtail of Veilstone had a great week, 13 KOs, 23 points. A mon that we saw be very defensive last season, so that's an interesting change of pace. Gengar tied for 4th in KOs and points with 11 KOs and 20 points. Baskin Legion F breaking the tie with 11 KOs. And Gliscor with 20 points for Mount Coronet. So Baskin Legion F, a lot of KOs, but not as efficient as Gliscor over the week. In assist, Heatran tops the board with 8 for Veilstone. Swampert of Humalau with 7, as well as Iron Treads of Nat Queen City. Cleavor of Corway and Ogrepon Cornerstone of Mauville with 6 apiece. As far as the per game leaders, Jirachi tops both boards with 5.7 points per game and 3.0 KOs per game. Very efficient in limited time this week. This is a mon that we saw be very productive last season in a similar role. Titan, after its monster week, comes in 2nd in points per game and KOs per game with 5.3 and 2.6 apiece. Gliscor with 5 points per game and 2.5 KOs per game, sharing that with Hoopa of Hearthome, and then Latias of Littleroot also getting in at 2.5 kills per game, but not as many points per game. And then Cleavor coming in at 4.8 points per game for Coralway. So Cleavor back to its double ways, so to speak, early in the season. So it should come to no surprise as anyone that Titan walks away with the Ruby League Week 1 Player of the Week award. Led the league in KOs, points per game, and KOs per game as far as Ruby League is concerned. This Mon was the biggest surprise of the first week of the season, and we saw it do it in a myriad of ways too. We saw the Belly Drum set come out. We saw an Amnesia Curse set come out. So right out the gate, Aleph able to cook up some good cooking for Titan in the first week of the season. It will be interesting to see what the adaptations are made going forward and whether or not people are going to be that concerned over an NU Mon getting all these points in the first week of the season. It's not like Iron Crown, who was a UU Terra captain and was a very clear ban candidate for the rest of the season. As for the Sapphire side of things, an Amorous Eye of Kitakami grabs that award, led the Sapphire League in KOs and points with 16 and 25, and put up some good numbers in 2.8 points per game and 1.8 KOs per game. A far more workhorse type of effort for an Amorous Eye in the first week of the season. In seasons past, we've seen this thing not be used that often, considering that it was banned pretty frequently, but come in, put up some good numbers where it was needed, and it has won Pokemon of the Week in the past. This time around, played a lot of games for Kitakami in the first week of the season, and was a big reason why Kitakami started off 2-1. So its efforts were rewarded with Pokemon of the Week, and Kitakami gets off to a good start on the season as a result. If you're wondering why there was no ZU Play of the Week this week, it's not because there weren't any ZU caliber plays that happened. It's because those are now covered by our new partners over on the NWBA network. First Impression, hosted by Tux and Max. You can see them multiple times a week. Not the most consistent schedule, but hey, more content, people love to see it. You can find that over on Tux's channel, which is listed below. So now, let's go ahead and get to our final segment of the day, the look ahead, where we take a look at this week's free agency moves, and there are some pretty notable ones considering that there is a GM takeover, essentially, as well as next week's schedule and what we can look forward to matchup-wise in week 2. It was a very active free agency in week 1, and we start with Marvel, which made 3 changes in the middle of the week to allow Luck to build the team more to his liking following his stepping up as interim GM of the Milotics. First off, Hatterene was released in place of Pelipper, Mimikyu was released in place of Basculegion Female, and Arcanine was released in place of Whimsicott. Luck in previous seasons has gone for the rain strategy, so it makes sense that he would want to go back to what's worked in the past. Basculegion Female was made a Terra Captain with Terra types in Water and Ghost, while Whimsicott was made Steel and Fairy. Moving on to the other free agency decisions that happened over the weekend. Surchester opts to get rid of Monior to replace it with Arcanine as a Terra Captain in Normal and Grass. Sunny Shore opts to get rid of Clodsire for Alomomola, swapping out OU defensive Mons. Humalao makes a big decision to get rid of Ursaluna to make room for Several Edge to get some more speed. Team was very slow and bulky, figured it was time to switch things up just a little bit. Littleroot opts to get rid of Dragouchi for a PU in Slowbro G. An interesting trend has emerged as a result. We have seen multiple teams this season opt to only carry 1 NUmon and instead carry 3 PUs instead. An interesting strategy for sure. NU a lot smaller than it was last season, and some GMs believe nowhere near as good either, and as a result would rather go shopping in the lowest tier to find Mons that provide a little bit better of a niche for their team as opposed to going through and being forced to stick with 2 NU Mons. Kitakami gets rid of Mousehold for the addition of Bisharp. So once again, Mousehold put back on the chopping block. It's hard to see this Mon ever really getting a chance to shine in the NWBA now, having been unemployed for a considerable amount of time for 3 seasons. Black City opts to get rid of Veluza for Colossal, an interesting decision. Colossal being made a Terra Captain with Normal and Ghost. 2 very odd typings as well. Ghost makes some sense to block Rapid Spin, but Normal, a very big question mark. What exactly is Keith plotting, and is there an explosion somewhere in that plan? Corway opts to get rid of Cryogonal for Tauros, Paldean, Aqua, making it a Terra Captain, Water and Steel, so yet another NU drop PU acquisition being put on the board here. Sicily opts to get rid of Skarmory to pick up the dropped Clodsire. So Sunny Shore and Sicily making some domino effect moves. Heart Home opts to get rid of Porygon 2 to pick up Arboliva, which fared very well for Ball Heat last season. So makes sense. He wants to pick up a mon that he's familiar with. And lastly, Marvel making yet another move, getting rid of Cyclizar for Magnezone. So going all in on the range strategy. We'll see just how effective it will be in the coming weeks, but thus far, Mauville sitting at 2-1 after week 1. Pretty good start to the season. So a lot of interesting moves here, a lot of Terra Captains being decided. Still a lot to be decided, so we'll likely see a lot more movement, and some of these mons that you see on the screen right now, are they going to get picked up or dropped again as the season goes on? So, as we look ahead to the Week 2 schedule, it is the beginning of interleague play and the beginning of 4 set weeks. So this is where teams are really going to have to start to lock in. This is where you're going to start to see some separation between teams in the standings. Obviously, you still have those all-important intra-league matchups. Some very notable ones like Nat Queen City and New Moon and Ambrit Town and Veilstone. But obviously, the interleague play is always going to be super interesting as well, because teams get the opportunity to go against teams they're only going to get to see once. So, some potential final previews. A little too early in the season to really call those that, but you are still going to see some pretty notable teams bang heads here in Week 2. And in a bit of a new segment here, we have key matchups to look out for in Week 2. Obviously, we talk about some potential hard-hitting matchups when we look at the schedule, but it's always nice to point out the really, really big matchups that you're going to see over the course of the week. Of course, our versus Seeker sets are always important to highlight, and we've got a triple header coming in Week 2. Black City and Sunny Shore get to face off in Ruby League play. Humalao and Littleroot will face off to determine who will be the final winless team standing. And Veilstone and Kitakami, a pair of 2-1 teams going head-to-head in interleague play, so that will be a fun matchup for certain. Elsewhere in the league, you've got New Moon and Mount Coronet, another interleague matchup that's pretty important. New Moon sitting at 3-0, Mount Coronet sitting at 1-2, but had a pretty strong performance given their record in Week 1. So this ought to be a pretty interesting interleague matchup for sure. And then you've got Mauville and Ambrit Town, perhaps the highest ceiling of any matchup this week. You're talking about one of the 2 undefeated teams in Ambrit Town and a very good 2-1 Mauville team on the other end. So overall, some very fun matchups on deck for Week 2. That's going to wrap up this week's episode. Thank you all for watching. I've been your host, King Vasser. Stick around. We've got an NWBA triple header coming up next. You know where. We'll see you soon.